We are live.
Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to invite a very dynamic surgeon for today's session of Eye Focus, Dr. Shreyas Ramamurthy. He's a consultant, cornea, cataract, and refractive services at the Eye Foundation in Coimbatore. He did his MBBS from Coimbatore Medical College, his MS Ophthalmology from Arvind Eye Hospital, and he completed his fellowship in cornea and anterior segment from LV Prasad Eye Institute. He has several awards, gold medals, and papers to his credit, and his special interest lies in lamellar corneal surgeries as well as refractive surgeries. So he'll be talking about pachymetry and topography today. So without further ado, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mritika, for the very kind introduction. And I know Dr. SH is not here, but I'd really like to thank him for having me over. It's always a pleasure to be a part of Eye Focus. And yes, while unfortunately this time we're not be able to meet everyone in person, but I hope we can have a nice interactive session online. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, I'm going to be talking to you all mainly about corneal topography or rather mainly about corneal tomography, a little bit about biomechanics and a little bit about pachymetry. I've tried, it's a theoretical topic. I've tried to keep it as simple and as practical as possible, trying to convey the most salient points. I'd be happy to stop at any point and discuss any doubts which there are. I know there are a few postgraduates who are online, and I'll be happy to stop at any point of time. So going on with corneal topography. So essentially the word topography came from this, study of planetary sciences, where we were studying the surface and the shape and features of the Earth. And this essentially, it's a surface of the, you can see the globe, which you're all very familiar with. And by just looking at it, though it's a two-dimensional picture, we're able to tell that the areas which are in blue are at sea level, the green is in plains, the yellow is plateau, and the red in this Himalayan region is at a much higher level. So basically, this is just simple concept which has been taken over to study the surface of the cornea, and that has been called the corneal topography. So again, in corneal topography, as you can see here, what originally came about was just a simple two-dimensional map to look at the axial curvature, where you had the cooler colors like blue and light green representing the flatter area of the cornea, and the hotter colors, that is, as you go into the yellows, orange, and red, which depicted the steeper areas of the cornea. So very simplistic way in which corneal topography started. The predecessor, of course, was the keratometer. Keratometer is still exceedingly useful when it comes to IOL power calculations, but unfortunately it gives you just a few points on the central 3 millimeters of the cornea and doesn't really give you any more information about the surface of the cornea. Subsequent to the keratometer, of course, we had the Placido-based imaging systems, which again are still in use nowadays for certain very specific reasons, where you're actually projecting a few Meyers onto the anterior surface of the cornea, and based on the distortion of these Meyers and the spacing between the Meyers, you can actually locate the steepness and the flatness of the cornea in various regions. Even today, the Placido-based imaging systems, though the more advanced systems, are very useful in detecting subtle changes in the anterior curvature of the cornea. When we are doing very advanced treatments like topography guided treatments, like even in patients with keratoconus, we even today rely on Placido-based imaging for planning such treatments. So it still has a place even in modern medicine. Moving on to the topographers or the tomographers. Now, like I said, topography is something which only looks at the surface, whereas the tomographers are looking at beyond the surface. We are now looking at a three-dimensional structure of the cornea, and we are able to scan the anterior surface, the posterior surface of the cornea, and also look at pachymetric evaluation, the thickness of the cornea as well. So strictly speaking, tomography should ideally refer to Scheimpflug-based systems and not actually, OBSCAN is not a true tomographer, but it is a slit scan mechanism whereby you're kind of getting an extrapolated data of the posterior float as well, of the posterior cornea as well. And therefore, it is one of the first images, the first devices, which was able to tell you, give you details about the anterior and posterior cornea. So I'll briefly talk about the OBSCAN 1 and 2. Again, OBSCAN is now slowly, at least the 1 and 2, of course, there is a newer version called the OPD scanner, but the older version of OBSCAN 1 and 2 is slowly becoming obsolete. And now the shine plug devices, like the Pentacam, Galili, and Sirius, are here to stay. I will not be talking too much about ASOCT. It goes beyond the scope of the talk, but the high resolution ASOCT and combination of topography with ASOCT is probably going to be the future. Clinical applications, whether it's an OBSCAN or a Pentacam, is most importantly is refractive surgery, where we are assessing the preoperatively whether the patients are suitable for refractive surgery, and postoperative assessment as well. To diagnose early ectasia and the follow-up of ectasia, to detect progression in keratoconus. In patients who have undergone either lamellar or penetrating keratoplasty, when we need to do suture removal, to look at the extent of astigmatism, to do selective suture removal. In contact lens fitting, both in soft as well as rigid contact lens fitting, it is useful. More importantly, now with the advent of the shine plug devices, we are able to do a lot more planning, whether it is for phakic IOLs, where we want to look at the anterior chamber depth measurements, and as well as in toric intraocular lens power calculations also it is useful. There are specific calculators which are available on the Pentacam as well as the Galili. I'll not be going into the biometry aspects of it, but even in post-LASIK IOL power formulae, again, they are extremely useful. So in case you're asked in an exam about clinical applications, is something which you can quickly write about. And this is common for almost all the devices that we are going to be discussing. So quickly about the OBSCAN 2. So like I said, it combines two technologies. It gives you an advanced Placido disc. Along with that, it gives you a slit scanning beam. Now, what the slit scanning beam is, first there's a Placido ring image which is captured, and then there are 40 scans, which are basically 20 slits from each side, which are projected at 45 degrees, and which are running first from left to right, and then again from right to left. And these are two ways it runs. And as you can see, because it's running from the periphery to the other direction, the central part of the cornea gets imaged twice, and there are more data points which are there in the central part of the cornea, which is where we are more interested in. And this gives you more data points and therefore more reliability. Based on this, we are looking at three sets of images, one which is the curvature, and then the elevation. I'll talk about what elevation is and why elevation is important, and of course the pachymetry maps. So the most important map perhaps is the curvature map, possibly the most primitive, but continues to remain the most important. So when it comes to the curvature map, we are actually looking at the axial or the sagittal curvature, where we are able to see based on the values, what would be the keratometric values at different points of the cornea. Now, we classify generally anything above 47 as a steep cornea, anything below 41 as a flat cornea, and somewhere between 41 to 47 is the normal range of our keratometric measurements. Most commonly, the values are between 42 to 46. So again, based on that, we can see which is the steep axis, which is the flat axis. As you can see here, the vertical meridian is steeper, and therefore this is a cornea with a with the rule astigmatism. This is again a very uniform cornea. So again, in the curvature maps, we are trying to really look at whether the curvature is regular or irregular, which is probably the most important point. And in regular scans, as you can see in this image, both the superior and inferior, there is no asymmetry. In irregular corneas, you can have more IS asymmetry, and this is one of the early indicators of corneal ectasia, like in keratoconus, where anything of an IS asymmetry of 1.4 or more is regarded as suspicious, and that is a very important criteria that you should keep in mind. Now, apart from that, we look at certain classic topographic patterns. We might have heard of something called a bow tie, and this is a very symmetric bow tie that you're seeing here. And if there is a certain asymmetric bow tie where the inferior is steeper than the superior, you look at an asymmetric bow tie. The other terminology, not as important nowadays, but what we call a skew deviation. That is normally the perpendicular line drawn from the axis of your steep cornea and the line which is on the perpendicular meridian. If the deviation is more than 21 degrees between the superior and inferior, the two lines which are drawn, then you call it skew deviation. So when there is more skew deviation, there is likelihood that you're going in more for keratoconus. Again, These are all things which are developed earlier, not so important in the era of corneal tomography. Moving on to elevation maps, which is exceedingly important. And when I talk about elevation maps, to some extent, the basic concept of elevation map is similar between OrbScan and Pentacam, though the way Pentacam images the elevation maps is more accurate, and we get better data from the elevation maps from the Pentacam itself. Now, why do we need elevation maps? So essentially what we mean by elevation is we are trying to get a reference surface. Now, each cornea is different, one from the other is different from the other, and therefore we are trying to get a reference surface which best fits or best conforms to the shape of that particular cornea. So as normally it can be either a sphere when we call it a best fit sphere, or it can be an ellipsoidal surface where we call it a best fit ellipsoid or best fit toric ellipsoid. The reason why we have elevation maps is that when you have a best fit sphere which conforms best to the shape of the cornea, any points which are just above or below the best fit sphere can be imaged more accurately. The importance of elevation maps is that you can look at focal increase in any focal increase in steepening or flatness more easily with the elevation maps, which could easily be missed out in your regular curvature maps. And that is where the elevation data really comes into play and is of great importance. So as you all know, the corneal surface is prolate, that is, it is steeper in the center and flatter as we go into the periphery. And here we are trying to give a sphere which best fits to the shape of the cornea, and therefore the central part of a prolate cornea would generally be slightly steeper than the best fit sphere, and as we go into the periphery, it would be flatter, as you can see in this particular map. Moving on to the pachymetry map, I'll talk a little bit about elevation maps again when we come to Pentacam. I'm quickly running through some slides of OrbScan here. And when we come to the pachymetry map, this is again, OrbScan gives us a less accurate estimation of our pachymetry. Scheimpflug is a little better. ASOCT is even better than Scheimpflug. And I'll discuss a little bit about the limitations later. And in the pachymetry, we are trying to see what is the central corneal thickness. Generally, let's say when you're planning a refractive surgery, you would want a minimum thickness for about 500 or 510 for a LASIK procedure, somewhere around 480 or 470 for a surface ablation procedure. Again, these are not values which are set in stone. These are just guidelines. And yes, these are values which can quote in the exam, but at the same time, pachymetry is just one of the decision-making factors when it comes to choosing your refractive procedure, but it is also a wholesome thing of looking at the keratometry, looking at various indices along with pachymetry. In the pachymetry map, we are also looking at any variation in thickness from the pupillary center to the thinnest location. And generally, if the thinnest location is not located in the center and is a little deviated away, that is a red flag sign. Anything, the thinnest location being 20 microns thinner than the central cornea, which is usually where you would expect the thinnest location to be. But if it's the thinnest location is away from the center of the cornea, is 20 microns thinner, that is also another red flag sign. So generally you get it as a quad map where you have the anterior and posterior elevation, and then you have the keratometry, and then you have the pachymetry. Apart from this, in the central of the map, you get these additional data where you have the SIMK, which gives you the astigmatism, the maximum keratometry, and the minimum keratometry. And the same power of the cornea and the axis is given over the 3 millimeter and 5 millimeter zones as well. And here you have something called the irregularity, where you have the extent of irregularity at the 3 millimeter and 5 millimeter zones. And just again, a rough guideline where anything above 1.5 in the 3 millimeter zone or 2.5 in the 5 millimeter zone are considered as significant red flag signs. It also gives you the white to white. It gives you the thinnest location, and also gives you the anterior chamber depth. And the anterior chamber depth here is being measured from the endothelium, which is how it should be done. And that is extremely important when it comes to planning of phakic intraocular lenses. And an anterior chamber depth of greater than 2.8 is a minimum prerequisite for planning an anterior chamber, for planning a phakic intraocular lens procedure. So moving on from OrbScan into Pentacam. Pentacam or Galilei are both Scheimpflug devices. The difference is Pentacam has a fixed camera and one rotating camera, whereas the Galilei is a dual Scheimpflug, where it has two rotating cameras. And the other difference is the Galilei also has the Placido imaging combined with the Scheimpflug imaging, whereas the Pentacam is a purely Scheimpflug device. And it gives you, obviously, measures a lot more data points than what you were measuring with the OBSCAN. And it images accurately the posterior corneal surface, which is a limitation of the slit scanning device. The principle of the Scheimpflug, again, it's basically the intersection of the three planes where each point is measured. That is the focus plane, your image plane, and your objective plane. And all of these 3 points intersection, which is again mapped across these various 1.38 lakh points which are being measured, and it gives you a truly three-dimensional image of the cornea. So this is typically how Pentacam image looks. I'll go into each of these segments quickly. First, you have the basic demographic data. You have the patient's name, age. Age is a very important factor which you need to look into, especially when it comes to refractive screening. Then you have the front of the cornea, where it gives you the K1, K2, K-mean, and the astigmatism. There's a very important number here called the QS, which is basically the quality score, which can be okay, which means it's good, and which is white. If it's yellow, that means caution, you could repeat the scan. If it's red, then it's probably the values which you're seeing in the center of the quad map is probably reliable, and it needs to be repeated. You have the same set of values in the back of the cornea, where you can again look at the K1, K2, the astigmatism on the posterior part of the cornea, which is again becoming more and more important, both in refractive surgery as well as when we're correcting astigmatism in toric intraocular lens implants. You also have something called the Q value. I'll not go into too much detail about Q value, but it is basically the extent of asphericity. Basically, the cornea, as we discussed, is prolate. That is, it is aspheric. It is not a perfect sphere. It is so the extent of change of the sphericity or a deviation from this being a perfect sphere, which is basically what we are. It's a very simplistic way of defining what asphericity is, and that change from the center to the periphery, and that is what is being measured as the Q value. It's important in certain topographic guided treatments. And generally, the Q value is between 0 to -1, and majority of the Q values are usually between -0.2 to -0.3. Coming to the pachymetric values, you have, like I mentioned earlier, you have the pachymetry of the pupillary center at the apex in the thinnest location. This being a completely normal scan, you see they're all very similar to each other. You also have the location, the X and Y coordinates of where each of these points are located. And as you can see here, the thinnest point is quite close to where the pupillary center and the pupillary apex is. There are all these 3 points, as you can see here, are all closely located to each other in normal cornea, whereas they can be quite far apart in ectatic corneas. And you also have the K max, which is again a very important criteria. Like I said earlier, when we're talking about steep corneas and flat corneas, when a K max is above 47 or 48, it is a very early indicator of suspicious corneas. And also, when we are looking at planning for refractive surgery, a Kmax is a very important number to keep in mind when you're going between microkeratome, femtosecond LASIK. The other important, like I said, the AC depth. In the Pentacam, you need to watch out. This can be external, and the default setting is actually external, which means it is measuring from the epithelium. So it is not just the internal anterior chamber depth, which we are concerned about when it comes to measurement for phakic intraocular lenses. And you have to change it from external to internal. So if you have external, it will generally be the internal AC depth plus the corneal pachymetry, which will give you the external AC depth. Moving on to the curvature maps, like I said earlier when we are talking about OBSCAN. Now, one very important thing which you need to keep in consideration is just not go by the colors and think that when we are having green or yellow that we are safe, and only when you see red, it is something which is dangerous. You really have to look at how the scale is on the left-hand side and how the gradation is. So this is a very good gradation to follow, which is about 2 diopters of shifts. And you can easily see any sudden shifts. But at the same time, if this gradation was, let's say, instead of 2 was in 4 diopter changes or 8 diopter changes, you could very well have this 53 diopter cornea in a slightly yellow or orangish color. and it is really the values which you should look at more than the color. And most importantly, look at the symmetry, where the superior and inferior cornea corresponding points at the 5 millimeter zone, and measure the amount of ISA symmetry. And if it is above 1.4, it is, as it is clearly so here, it is more indicative of something which is wrong in the cornea, probably an early ectasia. And as you can see here, an inferior steepening is what is usually most common. You can have superior steepening also, but inferior steepening is what is most common and is indicative of corneal ectasia. Corneal pachymetry, definitely more accurate with the Pentacam, with any Scheimpflug device than the slit scanning devices. As you can see here, the corneal pachymetry usually is between 510 to 550, which is the normal range. And this is certainly a thinner cornea. And as you can see here, there is a lot more difference from the thinnest point to the center of the cornea. And this is again possibly present in an ectatic cornea. Again, you never look at just one cornea scan and decide that this is an ectatic cornea. I'm just showing these to show that these are possibly red flag signs and these are abnormal corneas. You can have corneas with 520, 530 thickness with keratoconus. At the same time, you can have a 450 cornea, which is absolutely normal. So I'll show that in subsequent examples as well. So it's not just a specific value which you go by, but these are red flag signs, and you need to see more closely when you see a deviant value. Elevation maps, again, much more accurate. You have a best fit sphere and you have a measurement of the best fit sphere. Generally, we are looking at an 8 millimeter best fit sphere, which is the ideal size for your best fit sphere, 8 millimeters, because that has sufficient central and mid-peripheral data points to give you a sphere which best conforms to the shape of that cornea. And based on that, you get the anterior and posterior elevations. And this is a perfectly normal elevation. Within the central 3 mm zone, if you have anything more than plus 12 in the front, anything more than 16 or 18 in the posterior surface, these are red flag signs. So as you can see here, this is completely normal. And it's really the central 3 millimeter. As you go into the periphery, you will have data which is beyond 12 or 16, like I mentioned, and those are not red flag signs. It just indicates astigmatism or the way the bow tie is. And as we go into the periphery, there will be points which are deviant, but in the central 3 millimeters, if you have values which are above 12 in the front cornea and above 16 or 18 in the posterior cornea, those are considered as red flag signs. Moving on from best fit sphere to what we call an enhanced best fit sphere, which is available in the Pentacam, and that is where we have something called a Bellin-Ambrosio display, which I will discuss in subsequent slides. And this is perhaps the most important and most valuable aspect of the entire Pentacam display. And essentially, what we are trying to do here is, in a best fit sphere, let's say it takes into account, for calculating a best fit sphere, all the central and mid-peripheral data points to calculate a sphere which best conforms to the shape of that cornea. Now, if there is a focal central steepening, that focal central steepening will also be included in calculating the shape of the best fit sphere. And therefore, let's say if there is a central focal steepening, the best fit sphere is also going to be steeper, and therefore it might end up masking a central focal steepening which is there in the cornea. When we come to an enhanced best fit sphere, what we are doing is that we are excluding the central 3.5 to 4 millimeters of the cornea and taking the mid-peripheral data points to calculate the best fit sphere. So essentially, it is that central 3.5, 4 millimeters where usually where you get these early forms of ectasia, and it highlights any focal protrusions that you might have in the central region of the cornea. I hope I've made myself clear. I'll be happy to take any questions subsequently about this as well. I would really like you all to understand this concept, where the enhanced best fit sphere, we're excluding the central 3.5 to 4 millimeter and taking only the mid-peripheral data points and calculating this best fit sphere. Now, this best fit sphere will be flatter than the best fit sphere which you would have calculated, including the central points. And therefore, the traditional 12 and 18, which I mentioned for the anterior and posterior float, will not hold good here. But instead, you have the traditional elevation map, which is depicted here. Then you have the maps which are formed after excluding the central 3 or 3.5 or 4 millimeters, which will normally be depicted and written here. And then you get the difference between the map which was normally taken without, that is the regular best fit sphere, and with the enhanced best fit sphere. Then you get the difference map, and along with the difference map, you can see here, based on that, you have color gradations. They've made it very simple and very idiot proof. Everywhere, wherever you see green, it's normal. When you see yellow, that is 5 to 7 in the anterior or 12 to 16 in the posterior. That is the difference between the regular best fit sphere and enhanced best fit sphere. That is yellow. And something when you see in red, it's again a red flag sign, and something you need to be careful about. The other two important variables which the Pentacam gives us is one which is the corneal thickness spatial profile. As you all know, the cornea is thinnest in the center and increases in thickness, and there is a normal gradation in which the thickness increases from center to periphery. The central line is the mean, and you have two standard deviations above and below. And in a particular patient, if it is remains within these two dotted lines, that's considered normal. And when it deviates beyond, that is, let's say in a keratoconic cornea where the center is much thinner and the periphery is thicker, then it will not conform within these two standard deviations, and therefore that is one way of looking at it. You also have something called the percentage thickness increase, which again, like we discussed, there is a graded increase in thickness from the center to the periphery. And let's say if there is a higher increase than normal, so which essentially means that the central or paracentral cornea is thinner than usual, and therefore the periphery, the increase from center to periphery is more, then this central line of the patient will fall below the two dotted lines, and therefore that's again which is a red flag sign. You also have these differential scores given at the end of the Pentacam, which are again become very, very important guidelines when we are selecting patients for refractive surgery. You have something called the DF, which is the score for the front surface of the cornea, DB for the back surface, DP for the pachymetry values, T, which is a function of the thinnest point of the cornea, and Y, which is basically the axial displacement of the thinnest part of the cornea from the center. Again, you don't really have to remember any of these values. If they are normal, they'll be in white. If they are subnormal, they'll be in yellow. If they are abnormal, they'll be in red. Again, you have overall D, which is the final score, which gives different weightages for various scores from the Pentacam, and gives you the overall D, which is the most important score given in the Pentacam. And if it is in white, that is normal. Again, yellow, deviant. If it goes into red, something to be dangerous. The overall D of red, a definite no-no as far as refractive surgery is concerned. So like you can see here, of course, this is a patient with a very significant keratoconus, and you see elevation points in the front surface, and these are much more pronounced when you do bad analysis. And as you can see here, something which you would have probably missed in this scan, you'll definitely pick it up. This is something which you cannot miss in a keratoconic patient, and all these values are through the roof, and the overall D is also very much in red. So I'll just run you all through a few quick examples. So this is a perfectly normal scan. As you can see here, the curvature is normal, very symmetric. The pachymetry, again, the thinnest point, all these points are all very close to the center. The elevation data, you can see in the anterior and posterior elevation data. So this is a completely normal topography, and therefore the Bellin-Ambrosio display is also completely normal. Now here you have a cornea where you can see the curvature is normal, but the thickness is only 460. Now, like I mentioned earlier, when we just look at the pachymetry and someone tells you the pachymetry of 460, you'll probably say, oh, this is an abnormal cornea, it's probably ectasia. But look again, this patient has an absolutely normal curvature, absolutely normal front and back elevation. So this is just a thin cornea and not an ectatic cornea. So again, this is yet another example. Again, there's no IS asymmetry, minimal skew deviation, but not significant. Anterior and posterior cornea is normal, but thickness is only 458. So this is the left eye of the same patient. So both eyes symmetrically thin corneas, but normal curvature, both front and back surface are normal. Yes, but because it's a thin cornea, you'll have the pachymetry and the thinnest location being abnormal. But you can see here the difference map, the enhanced ectasia display, the DF, DB are all completely normal. So this is a normal cornea, but a thin cornea, and definitely you would not even consider cross-linking such corneas. But let's say a similar thickness cornea, about 467, probably thicker than the cornea we saw earlier. But you can see here, there is an ISA symmetry and the inferior steepening is there. And you also have an elevation within the central 3 millimeters, which is 19. So corroborating all of this, that's why I said you cannot look at a single value and decide that this is a weaker or a ectatic cornea. So this is a cornea with an ISA symmetry, with also thinning in the center, and also a posterior elevation, which is abnormal. And as you can see here, the overall D is also in the red. And therefore, this is a cornea which is possibly early keratoconus and which needs follow-up to see if there is progression. And if there is progression, you need to cross-link these corneas. Now, this cornea is completely different, completely opposite to what you've been seeing earlier. Flat in the center and steep in the periphery. Anyone would like to guess what the possible reason is?
Post-refractive surgery.
Wonderful, excellent. So this is essentially a flat cornea. So this, we call it an oblate cornea. So where the center is flatter and the periphery is steeper. This is because the patient has undergone a myopic LASIK. So if it was a hyperopic LASIK, it will be the opposite. The center will be steeper, even steeper than normal, and we call it a hyperprolate cornea, where it is more prolate. But this is oblate, that is the center is flat and the periphery is steeper, and correspondingly you have a thinner cornea as well. And this is, again, now what about this? Is this ectasia? Could this be ectasia? You have significant ISA symmetry, flatter superior, much steeper inferior. What could this be?
Would anyone like to take this question?
So it's a decentered myopic LASIK.
Fantastic, fantastic. I don't think I should be taking this class for y'all. All of y'all seem to know all of this. So this is exactly as I mentioned, this is a decentered ablation. So whenever you see now within the central 3 millimeter itself, you have a significant ISA symmetry. Now, yes, you should be careful. You should follow up this cornea. But if you only look at the axial curvature, yes, you would be frightened. You'd probably think, oh, is this patient developing ectasia? But look at the pachymetry as well. It is again decentered superiorly. You have inferior cornea, which is thicker, but whereas the superior, which is thinner and corresponding to the axial curvature. Again, looking at the elevation data also corresponds to what you're seeing in the curvature. So correlating all these points, this is a decentered ablation, not ectasia, not something you need to be worried about. However, you probably want to treat the decentered ablation with some topography guided treatment, but definitely not ectasia, no need for cross-linking. Now, this is a patient with a frank keratoconus. As you can see here, ISA symmetry, elevation in the anterior and posterior floats, thinning in the cornea. Now, this is pre-cross-linking. This is a progressive case of keratoconus. And I will show you the next map, which is post-cross-linking. Now, you can see here, the cornea is there is a little bit of flattening here. You still have some of the elevation points. Posteriorly, the cornea is still elevated. But when you look at the pachymetry, it was 432 here. And in the post-cross-linking period, later in the follow-up, it has come to 353. Now, again, is this progression of keratoconus? Do we need to repeat cross-linking? Could this be something else? Any guesses? No.
Anybody? Dr. Vijay, Dr. Diksha, Dr. Shaleen?
Good. If you'll answer this, I was going to stop the presentation and just ask you all any doubts. So this is essentially, now this is something which can happen very commonly. And even by practicing ophthalmologists, I've had patients referred as saying progression in keratoconus, the thickness in the cornea has decreased significantly. And does this patient warrant a repeat cross-linking? A closer look at the cornea will show you that there is a certain amount of haze. Now, this is one of the major limitations of even a Scheimpflug device. A Scheimpflug device, though gives a three-dimensional view of the cornea, is an optical device, and therefore it does not measure very accurately when the cornea is not optically clear. Even in a keratoconic patient, if there is some apical scarring, again, the values will not be accurate. Even a non-keratoconic patient, for any reason, if they have some scarring, or let's say in this post-cross-linking, they have some haze. The reason is the way the pachymetric values are measured is by the reflection or from the anterior and posterior surfaces of the cornea. Now, when there is a haze, there is an additional surface which is now producing an altered reflective surface. And therefore, what the machine calculates as the anterior and posterior surface of the cornea changes, and therefore it gives you erroneous values. So this is just because of the haze, you are getting an artificially thinner cornea based on pentacam. If you went ahead and did an ASOCT or did an ultrasound measurement, you would actually get a more accurate depiction of the pachymetry of the pachymetric measurements. I'll quickly run on to corneal biomechanics. I won't spend too much time on it. Now, why do we need to look at corneal biomechanics? Despite the devices which we have available with us today, the Scheimpflug devices, we still see cases of corneal ectasia, that is post-LASIK or post-SMILE or post-PRK ectasia on and off. Post-PRK is very rare, but post-LASIK and post-SMILE ectasias still do exist, despite very good preoperative screening protocols. And this is possibly because of the underlying corneal biomechanics. And one such device which is able to measure, or possibly the best device which we have, which is commercially available till date, is the Corvus, which gives us a kind of measurement of the corneal biomechanics, a surrogate measure of the corneal biomechanics by an air puff, which is projected onto the cornea, and the deformation of the cornea to the air puff is measured. Now, this is a normal cornea which deforms to this air puff. As you can see here, just notice the amount of deformation which takes place. We are measuring the extent of deformation, the amplitude of deformation, and taking out various data from it. Compare that to a keratoconic cornea, you'll see that the amount, the area of deformation, the amount of deformation, the amplitude of deformation is all much more in the keratoconic cornea as compared to the normal cornea. Based on this, various measurements, the amount of deformation, the area of deformation, the inverse corneal radius, all of these, I will not go into the details, but all of these are measured. And based on these values, we have something called the Vinciguerra screening report, which is available, which gives us a new value called the Corvus biomechanical index. Now, even if you're not following all this data, suffice to know a value called the CBI, which is the Corvus biomechanical index, which takes into account the sum total. Like you have the overall D in the pentacam, you have something called the Corvus biomechanical index here, where which gives us a range from 0 to 1. And as you can see here, again in green, orange, and red, as we move from biomechanically what the Corvus measures as a stronger to a weaker cornea. It is a sum total of number of these novel parameters, and it's a new device which is available. A quick example of a case where you can see the pentacam map, absolutely normal, normal pachymetry, normal elevation maps, absolutely normal overall D. But when you see the CBI, it is near 1, 0.98. So which shows a very much decreased corneal biomechanics. So this is a completely normal pentacam, normal scan, but a CBI which is normal. So if you look at the other eye of this patient, the other fellow eye has frank corneal ectasia. So this was a normal eye of a patient who had corneal ectasia. And if, let's say, if the patient had symmetric features in both eyes without this picture of ectasia in the other eye, you would have probably thought it's an absolutely normal cornea. But the Corvus gives you an additional insight into the corneal biomechanics. Now, we also have something called a TBI, which is essentially, we have now been able to marry these two technologies where you have the Corvus and the pentacam measurements, and combining the features of both the biomechanical and the tomographic data, we have something called the tomographic biomechanical index, or the TBI, which is a combination of the two and is even more accurate than the CBI and the TBI. So this is This was that of a normal cornea, and then again that of an abnormal cornea where the TBI is much more elevated. Essentially, as you can see here, compared to the CBI and the overall BAD-D, the TBI has a far greater accuracy in detecting form thrust keratoconus cases. So essentially, combining corneal tomography and biomechanical evaluation, we have the ultimate ectasia detection. Quickly into corneal pachymetry, I'll just take a couple of minutes. As you already saw with the various devices, it's useful in pre-refractive screening, useful to detect early ectasia. In early endothelial compromise, where you're not able to see clinically visible edema, but pachymetry is a useful guide in Fuchs dystrophy or in posterior polymorphous dystrophy, or even in grafts. When a graft might be in early failure, you may not see edema, but the specular counts might be low. But if the pachymetry is increasing, that's possibly an indication that the graft is failing. Again, in glaucoma, as you all know, a thinner and thicker cornea can have an effect on intraocular power measurements, and that needs to be kept in mind when you have an excessively thin or excessively thick cornea. Looking at the pachymetry measurements, the ways devices to measure it, you have the ultrasound, which is considered the gold standard. The ultrasound can be the regular probe which you use for ultrasound, or you have the UBM which can be used. Confocal microscopy is also another way of measuring pachymetry. Both ultrasound and confocal microscopy are contact ways of measuring. Non-contact, as you saw, is tomography. Tomography is very good, as you saw, in optically clear corneas. But let's say if the cornea is not optically clear, the ASOCT is extremely useful, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Ultrasound pachymetry is still considered gold standard. So whenever you have a device which is brought in to measure pachymetry, we compare it with ultrasound, and that's how you say whether the accuracy of the device is good or not. It's easy to use, it's portable. Importantly, it can be used intraoperatively. So let's say you have a patient with keratoconus and you're wanting to do cross-linking. We measure the thickness of the cornea on table. So generally, 400 microns of thickness is what we want as a safe cutoff for doing cross-linking. And if you can use the on-table ultrasound pachymetry to measure this, it can also be used in young children in pediatric cases as well. The disadvantage, of course, it's a contact method. And the major difficulty is you really can't exactly pinpoint which location in the cornea you're measuring. And therefore, the reproducibility is poor. It is observer dependent, and therefore is not used as a standard device when the cornea is optically clear. Looking at the ASOCT, it is perhaps the most underrated, but the most useful device for measuring anterior segment OCT. That is useful for measuring pachymetry. And this is actually a patient with SHED, that is congenital hereditary endothelial dystrophy, and a near opaque cornea. And you can measure the pachymetry very easily. It's almost 1,000 microns in thickness. And you can also, apart from measuring the overall pachymetry of the cornea, you can measure the epithelium also separately. The reason this is important is because the epithelium is a great masking agent and can vary from patient to patient. And especially in ectatic corneas, the epithelium acts like a masking agent and tries to smoothen the cornea. And you can have thickness even as high as 80 or 90 microns of epithelial thickness. And once you remove that epithelium, it is the underlying stroma which you are going to treat. And the epithelium is generally said to be thinnest over the apex and thicker around the base of the cone. And that is why it is tending to mask the cone. The reason why this is important, early deviations in epithelial thickness can also be used for detecting early ectasias as well. So that's all I have to talk as of now. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'll just take that, although you've explained everything, I feel. So one is about, if you could explain once again about the enhanced best fit sphere, skewing, and inferior superior asymmetry. Right.
So enhanced best fit sphere, like I again said, I'll repeat it. It's a concept which I actually normally like to draw and explain, but See, essentially, when we are taking a reference surface, either a best fit sphere or something called a best fit toric ellipsoid. I'll not go into the toric ellipsoid. I don't want to confuse you much. Let's just talk about the best fit sphere. We are taking points from the central part of the cornea and progressively towards the mid periphery. So generally, like I said, 8 millimeters of the cornea we are measuring. Now, when we are measuring the entire 8 millimeters of data is taken, let's say if there is a focal protrusion in the cornea in the center or paracentral, which is where early ectasia usually presents, those individual steeper points will also be taken into account to calculate the best fit sphere. So you'll have a steeper best fit sphere, and those steeper focal elevations will also conform to the shape of the best fit sphere, and therefore the quad map will show as if the elevation of the anterior and posterior elevation will be completely normal. Now in the enhanced sphere, we are excluding the central 3 millimeter and we are only taking the mid peripheral points. So essentially you're getting a flatter best fit sphere, but because of this flatter best fit sphere, let us say if you have focal protrusions in the center of the cornea, that becomes more pronounced. So we calculate the points on the best fit sphere. So when I showed you those 6 scans on the pentacam, you have the regular data taken with the best fit sphere of the 8 millimeters. And then you have the data with the central 3.5 to 4 millimeter excluded and the difference map. So when the difference is again calculated from the best fit sphere and the enhanced best fit sphere, and when the difference is, let's say in the anterior cornea, less than 5 or 5 to 12 or greater than 12, this becomes green, yellow, and red. And therefore, you are able to detect protrusions, minimal focal protrusions in the cornea much more easily than you would have picked up with the regular quad map. And what was the other question was IS asymmetry. Yeah, IS asymmetry, I mean, there's you just are looking at corresponding points on the superior and inferior part of the cornea within the central 5 millimeter zone. And if there is more than 1.4, that is a red flag sign, and that needs to be taken into account. It is one of the still, though one of the very early points which was given even in the era of Rabinowitz, but still holds good even in this era. And something more than 1.4, we need to be much more cautious.
Okay, so now among the various investigations which are available, when we suspect a thin cornea, which would you recommend as the best investigation to, ask a patient to get it done?
So, like I said, if it's just pachymetry which we're looking at, possibly ASOCT is the best device, and that is because even if the cornea has a little bit of scarring, a little bit of haze, a little bit of this irregularity, the ASOCT is going to give you the most accurate data. And for, let's say, a follow-up of pachymetry, ASOCT is very, very good. But if we are looking at refractive surgery and we are looking at a cornea which is thin, then definitely a Scheimpflug device is what we would look at. And any Scheimpflug device, either a Pentacam or Galili, I have no financial interest here. All of them have their own ectasia indices. I've just, put slides about the Pentacam because that's the most widely used device. But the Galili, the Sirius, all have their own separate screening criteria for keratoconus, and all of them are quite useful.
Okay, sir. Okay, now we have one more question.
Yeah.
What is the importance of the sagittal curvature map?
So, yeah, like I explained in both the OBSCAN as well as the Pentacam, sagittal curvature is just another name for the axial curvature. And all the points which we discussed, whether it is looking at the IS asymmetry, any steepness or the flatness of the cornea, everything is looked at only in the sagittal curvature. And that is the most important scan for looking at the keratometry of the cornea.
Okay, so one last question. In all these investigative modalities, are there any pre-saved data with regards to different age group? Like what is the normal for a particular age group?
Sorry if I didn't mention that. So when we say those, like I said, 2 standard deviations, then I said the individual D values and the overall D value. So all these deviations are calculated from normative data. So you have normative data from different age groups, different racial backgrounds, Caucasians, Blacks, Asians, and all these normative data are taken into account, and based on which we calculate whether our cornea is within the 2 standard deviations or not. So definitely that's a very important point, and that's taken into account when we are talking about all these standard deviation values.
Okay, sir. Would any of the students on the hot seat like to ask anything?
A couple of questions in the chat, I think. Just check.
Sir,
Hello,
we've
sir. How
taken-
are you, sir?
Hi. Shares.
I
Yeah.
think
The chat.
yeah, we've covered those questions, sir.
If Corvus is not available, how do we detect ectasia? Corvus is just a recent device. Still, very few centers are using Corvus. I just put up a few slides of it just to tell you that because Corvus or any of these biomechanical device as a standalone has still not reached its level of importance. Now, because Corvus is bought over by Oculus and it's combined with Pentacam, we are getting values like the CBI and TBI, which I showed, which are pushing the barrier as far as early detection of ectasia is concerned, or early detection of FFKC is concerned. So previously, even the best criteria which we had was able to differentiate between normals and FFKC to only about 91%. But now with the newer indices available, we've been able to push it as high as 97-98%. Still cases which fall out of it, but at least it is pushing the barrier as far as detecting FFKC is concerned.
I think we're done with all the questions, sir.
Thank you, Shreyas. It was a brilliant talk.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much.
Thank you for joining in, sir. And
Yeah,
it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And we hope for more talks from you in the future.
Sure, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And before I thank all the participants, let me announce the next class. It's on specular microscopy and confocal microscopy by Dr. Rashmi Deshmukh from University of Cambridge. That will be on Friday, 21st August. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Mritika. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah, she has a question.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, if hello, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Sir, if D value in the enhanced ectasia display, if D value is more than 1.6 and average is more than 1.2, and ART max is less than 391, then we should call it suspicious of the keratoconus or confirmatory keratoconus.
No. So, like I said, that's why the reason I didn't talk about specific numbers is because all these numbers are just guidelines. There is, it's important that you look at it as a whole. You cannot just look at one individual number and say this is a keratoconic cornea. Yes, when you have an abnormal number, it's a red flag sign, and you need to look at all the other scans and take it as a whole picture. So, like I showed you, there was a thin cornea where the overall D was abnormal. The DT, DP values were all abnormal. Ambrosio's relational thickness was abnormal, but still it was a normal cornea. That is, it was just a thin cornea, but otherwise a completely normal cornea. So you will not go ahead and diagnose that as keratoconus, and neither will you cross-link those corneas. Similarly, you can have the reverse, where you can have a highly astigmatic cornea, which is very steep, which need not be an ectatic cornea, which is a normal cornea. You have symmetric steepening. You can have keratometry of 49-50, but which is absolutely symmetric, high with the rule astigmatism, which you again see in children, and that is completely normal, and you should not diagnose it as keratoconus and cross-link those corneas.
So, and so sometimes the color coded, as you shown, as you have shown in the picture, sometimes the color coded picture is not given, and like in exams also, plain white and pink colored pictures were given. So, like not red, green, and yellow.
You mean like a black and white printout was given?
Not black and white, sir. White and pink. The shadow was pink and base was white.
No, the color coding format is uniform. It is set in this thing. Yes, you can change it. There is something called the American standard, German standard, which slightly changes the hot and cold colors and the way it is oriented. But like I said, The colors are there to give you an impression, to overall visual impression, but it is the values which are more important. So even if you have a black and white printout of a Pentacam or an OBSCAN, you can still look at the values and still make the diagnosis, and the colors are just for a visual impression.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Right, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye,
once
good day.
again. Good night, sir.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Pratik.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.